So when Andor asked if I would come back, I was really excited. I'm like, absolutely, what are we talking about? And he said, the question is, how can we challenge our worldviews and be change agents? I was so excited because, as I talked about last year about creating change and the systems that we currently live under, I didn't really talk as much about the dominant worldview that we live under. And worldview is how people make sense of the world that we live in. It's how they explain their own experiences. But before we can think about shifting that worldview, we need to understand how the dominant worldview is used to explain or make sense of the problems that people are facing. All of us wake up every morning with these ideas in our heads that we've all been conditioned to based on dominant worldview. Under the current hierarchies, systems, and structures, we're all led to think, act, and prioritize as individuals. Only individual responsibility, only individual accountability, and only individual wins, right? If you do something and you accomplished it, you're not to give credit to someone else. You did it all by yourself. If something is wrong with our lives, it's our fault and our fault alone. We're supposed to just have individual responsibility. And if you simply work harder, your life will get better. That's one of the main views that we're told over and over again. But when we think honestly about our lives, we're not and should not be alone or isolated. I did not get to where I am today all by myself. I've lived through horrible circumstances. Life was not always easy. It continues not to be easy. And I have worked hard, and I have an amazing support system. I have a wonderful squad that supports me and has supported me, and my squad continues to grow. We yearn for the collective. We're not beings that are innately individualistic. We look for places that we belong. We look for places that we fit. Being in community, having support, and being supportive to one another is a good thing. It's not a weakness to ask for help. It's not a weakness to say we did this together. Being a collective also allows us to be our full selves in a community of love and collective leadership that allows us to shift power. No one person has ever changed the world by themselves. Not Dr. Martin Luther King, not Malcolm X, not Rosa Parks, not any of those names that we often hear in our history books. No one has ever done it by themselves. And we should push against the individual argument and challenge that dominant worldview of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We need to recognize that not everyone has a level playing field. Not all of us start at the same place. Not all of us have the same barriers. Some of us have none. And not everyone has access to the same opportunities and resources. Interestingly enough, though, when we think about resources, the resources that exist for the few would not be accessible without the collective, without the larger us. The manual labor of the masses that has been unpaid and underpaid for the entire history of the country that we live in. Those few that possess the most would have us look at the minimal examples of success of the others to dissuade us from the reality of inequity and inequality. That if one Black girl from the city of Schenectady can go to college and get a good paying job, then there's nothing stopping all of those other Black and brown girls in Schenectady from doing the same thing. Those few also want us to believe in the individual responsibility to dissuade us from our unity and collective leadership and power. We're talking about the dominant cisgendered white male patriarchy. Why should we not be a collective? Why should we just be individuals? The place where the few want us to believe in the collective is when it's easy to paint us all with a monolithic brush. one that is social constructs to divide us into groups and categories that suit the few that are in power. When we hear statements of all women are, all Mexicans are, all Black men are, those are monolithic brushes that put us into neat little groups and categories that support dominant narratives. Other examples of things that I hear very often is that the wealthy have worked harder and are more deserving than the people who work 60 hours a week and are not able to provide for their families. That if you have not been able to provide for your family, get a second job, get a better job. If you can't take care of your family, it's your fault. That being emotional is a sign of weakness, that women are emotional, and that emotionality means you can't be objective and make clear thoughts and clear decisions, rational decisions. That everyone has the same opportunities because this is America and that's what we have. But at the same time, we see that predominantly Black and brown schools do not receive 100% of the funding that they are owed, while their white counterparts do. That places like Schenectady are owed $46 million a year. Albany City School District is owed like $30 million a year. And even in the city of Troy, it is more than $12 million a year that the school district is owed. And these are majority districts of marginalized students. We also hear that if you give more money to corporations, it will benefit the workers. But when that was in practice, we still see those same companies take big pay bonuses for their CEOs, cut jobs and positions, and also not raise wages for all of their workers. We're told to privatize everything, our schools, our prisons, and all businesses, because that would be to the public benefit. That we should not regulate companies, but if we do, then we wouldn't see the pollution in our air and our water. Because every time we regulate a company, it then puts constraints on them for how cheap their labor is and the process by which they're able to earn extra money. Too personal for me is the idea that once a criminal, always a criminal, that if you have been arrested, you are now a criminal. You do not need to be convicted. That once your mugshot is in that book, it is one that is compared to others, whether you've been convicted of a crime or not. And that if you do your time for doing the crime, that time does not end, because then you are denied services upon your release and no support to actually be a productive member of society. We also are told that big government interferes and restrains, quote unquote, us, and hurts the economy, as opposed to the reality that when our government looks out to protect us, protect the entire collective, every single one of us, that it will protect and provide for all of us, create policies, laws, and budgets and procedures that protect us from violence, and provide resources that we wouldn't be able to do individually. When there's a pothole in front of my house, I'm not able to get a contractor to fix that street. I'm also not able to get everyone on the street to pitch in together to fix that pothole that impacts our entire street. But we do ask that our government make sure that our streets are repaired, right? It's not my responsibility. But government then does what we individually wouldn't be able to do. All that I've said really fits into 4 big buckets, 4 dominant narratives that I work tirelessly to break down every single day. The first one, if you work hard, you'll succeed. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's your fault if you don't win. It's your fault if you do win. It's just you. It's that individuality. The second is that government is inefficient or incompetent or corrupt. Our government was designed to provide and protect all of us, including to pave our streets. That free market will solve all of our problems, It will not stop Roman from crying. You could totally let him out to run. That's fine with me. Come on, boo-boo. So the idea that free market will solve all of our problems and that we should privatize everything. He's good. He's coming up the stairs. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. You're good. Trickle deck. Do you want your pacifier? You say thank you. It's also really close to his bedtime. The idea that free market and trickle-down economics is going to save us is a lie that's been resoundingly a problem for many, many decades. The fourth and final bucket of dominant narrative that in a room predominantly of women, that white men are superior and should have all of the power. That somehow our government should be predominantly run by white men. That our CEOs and corporations should all be run by white men. That it's not possible that 50% of the population is as smart and talented as those individuals. So our job is to shift that worldview, to shift how people explain the problems that they're facing. Because if they assign truth to the reasons for the problems, then they will be more likely to support our solutions to those problems. We have to shift worldview to win policy changes, and then to continue shift worldview and win even stronger policy changes. We have to unlearn and push back against the dominant narrative, push back on microaggressions that foster organizational cultures. We should do so with a collective power. It is not any one of us, it is all of us. Collective power has the ability to compel an individual or an institution to do something they really don't want to do. The civil rights movement was collective power, and those in power did not want to give rights to Black people. They were forced. It was not because it was the right thing to do. It was because it was the thing they had to do. Collective power is thousands of Black men going on strike to force white men to recognize them as a union. In both of those instances, there was shared power in decision-making. Not everyone knows that during the Montgomery bus boycott, after Martin Luther King Jr. joined the fight, every time he spoke to the masses that joined him in churches, he asked for a vote. It was a democratic process. It was not one man making a decision, but the collective power of hundreds and thousands of individuals that were deciding what their next steps were going to be. When we look at the greatest moments of positive change, change that increased the scope of humanity, dignity, and respect, during those times, it has been about the will of the collective to make those in power do something they did not want to do. To be agents for change, we need to challenge our own biases and privilege and unlearn what the dominant worldview conditioned us to believe. We need to lean into discomfort. I have privilege. I am a Black woman and I have privilege. English is my first language. I was born in this country. I am a cisgendered heterosexual woman. I have privilege. My light skin is a privilege against my darker skinned sisters. And still, I am a Black woman that faces oppression. And it's not comfortable. When I'm in a room and we have a Capital District Women of Color Committee, that is the most diverse room of individuals. They are all women of color, but there is no greater diversity than in that space when I am there. And I have to lean in and step back and not assert my privilege and let others speak. And guess what? I like to talk. So it's not easy. but I recognize there needs to be space for those that are often not heard. We need to lean into that discomfort, especially upper body strength. We need to listen and to lead with impacted voices. Those living oppressed know better than the rest of us what change we need. If you're living in poverty, you know what economic change we need. If you are living under a system of racism that segregates our schools, and in New York State, we are one of the most segregated states in the country, then those individuals know what policy changes we need for our schools. We need to grow the collective power of the movement, which is the power of people, it is the power of money, and it is the power of ideas, until we end capitalism, and then I won't have to worry about the power of money anymore, right? But this isn't something also that happens overnight. When we make the decision that we want to be agents for change, we're making a commitment to a long battle. People tend to think of the civil rights movement as a, flash in the pan, that there was a bus boycott and then MLK showed up and yay, we won some rights. 40, 50, 60 years of struggle before we saw concrete systemic change. And no, it shouldn't take that long, right? I shouldn't have to worry that my son's going to be giving this speech at Russell Sage College saying, my mother stood here 50 years ago, or that any of his sisters would stand up here. But the reality is, it takes time, commitment, and the wherewithal to look at ourselves and to demand justice from others. And that if we're not willing to do that, then we will continue to perpetuate the same systems of oppression. That if we say, well, I just want to make sure that women have the right, but we don't talk about the intersectionality of what it means to be a Black woman, or to be a Muslim woman, or to be a Mexican woman, or to be a Black woman living in poverty, or to be a Black transgendered woman living in poverty, and that all of those layers come with complications, then we're not going to have justice and we'll never have democracy. I imagine that this is a body of individuals that believes in democracy. And for us to have true democracy, because we currently don't, everyone would have to have access, regardless of their race, their gender, their religion, their country of origin, the language that they speak. If there are any barriers to someone being able to fully participate in all of the wonders of this country, then we do not have a democracy, and we have to continue to fight for change. It means that the worldview hasn't shifted. If we can paint a brush across a group of people, then we've not shifted the narrative enough to have equity, equality, and justice for everyone. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. But it's completely worth it. Whether you're a parent or not, because people have said to me, well, Jamaica, you're a parent, you worry about what the world will be like for your children. That's true. Even when he's trying to rip my earrings out. I also just worry in general, because I believe in the collective. It's not, everyone is so nervous he's gonna rip my earring out, it's great. I'm watching your faces. It's not just for me and my children. I believe in collective power and collective leadership. I believe in a community-minded system where I want everyone to have access and opportunity, because then it is better for us. Because who is that child in a school that hasn't yet invented the cure for cancer because his school is underfunded? Who is that girl that's going to become president but doesn't have an opportunity because she's considered emotional, and being emotional somehow is a negative. These are things we get to change. It's not some foreign concept. I don't want that. It's actually what we've seen time and time again. So we have precedents, right? We know that we can create change because bad things, worse things happened before. We should not forget the things that happened, because those who do not pay attention to history are doomed to repeat it. We're repeating things, even when people say, well, I haven't forgotten. But also in the face of when we're told to move on and to forget. Be the change maker that allows every single person in this room and in this community and across the globe the access and opportunity to their own individual and collective success. No one deserves poverty or pain. No one deserves to not know whether or not they'll have a home to go to at the end of the day. No one deserves to not know, to actually, it's not even to know, it's to assume I can't go to the doctor because there might be a copay. These are things all of you can change. And it will not just involve yelling at the top of your lungs at a rally every once in a while. It will involve strategy and dedication. It will involve you working together collectively across all imaginary lines, whether they are zip codes or race or gender. It will take a multiracial movement, as it has in every other instance, for us to create the change that will allow Roman the world that we all deserve. Thank you.